So, Eternals just came out, and as I'm sure many of you already know, it's not doing brilliantly critically. I mean, it's no Suicide Squad, but at the time of writing this video, it's on 48% fresh. And people are making a big deal out of this because A, it's the lowest Rotten Tomatoes rating we've seen so far in any MCU film, and B, it's the first one to be rotten. These things tend to be certified fresh, and by a pretty comfortable margin. The lowest rated ones before this are The Incredible Hulk at 67% and Thor the Dark World at 66%. That's a pretty far cry from Eternals' 48%, and seeing these two are generally held to be the worst this franchise has to offer. But too many people are seeing this figure and assuming that it straightforwardly translates into a quality judgment of the movie, especially those who haven't seen it, and this isn't really the case. The first point to make is that 48% doesn't mean it's a 4.8 out of 10 or anything like that. Now, this is a point that's been made before, so I won't linger on it, but Rotten Tomatoes is a review aggregation site. All it does is receive reviews from a list of qualifying sources and then classify them as fresh or rotten reviews. That is, are the reviews more positive than negative or more negative than positive? And the score we see is the percentage which are more towards the side of positivity. Now, if that sounds a little bit like a false binary, that's because it is. And you can see this pretty clearly when you actually look at the reviews being cited. Some of the positive ones don't seem very positive at all, and vice versa. And some 3 out of 5 reviews are counted as fresh, and some as rotten. Weird. You might be thinking, well, if 5 out of 10 people like something, isn't that pretty much a 5 out of 10 score for quality? And the answer is no, not really. I saw Always Be My Maybe the other day, don't ask me why, and that's the perfect example. It's like 90% approved on Rotten Tomatoes, but a score of 6.8 on IMDb. So this is a case of a movie which almost everyone liked, but mostly agreed that it was just pretty good. Not many people thought it was bad, but equally, not many people thought it was great. And that's a pretty important nuance that doesn't come across in that excellent Rotten Tomatoes score. So the first way to look at a score of 48% is as indicative of a divisive movie. It seems to represent that there's a lot of disagreement whether or not this is a good film, because there are positive reviews and plenty of them. And that's the case to a degree here, but it isn't the main issue with this score and these reviews for Eternals. It's the fact that there are so many negative reviews that are really, really bad. Because there are a few common trends here and none of them really make much sense. Now, I'm not going to go in depth on one specific review, although the New Yorker's review is tremendously, gloriously stupid, and I may well make a video on that alone. I'm going to touch on 1 or 2 of the main issues that we see time and time again instead. And the main area in which we can see review after review fail is their conception of the Marvel norm. Because what we're seeing a lot of here is critics focusing less on Eternals specifically, and more on the ways it follows or diverges from its MCU predecessors, as well as Chloe Zhao's other films. Let's go back to the way Rotten Tomatoes scores don't correlate with quality, but rather palatability. In the past 5 years or so, the MCU has perfected the art of creating certified fresh movies, films certain to score a whole bunch of 3 or 4 star reviews across the board from a majority of publications and their film critics, and equally certain to be forgotten by them moments afterwards. This formula is as follows: a fairly snappy if homogeneous visual identity, well-written scripts that move along at a clip, punctuated by slightly better than average action scenes, largely impressive CGI, leavened with jokes which land more often than not. Often some moral or political topic is vaguely present within the plot, perhaps anchored by a hero and villain, and by the end we come away with some sense of watered down social purpose. To be clear, I'm not saying that this brief describes all MCU films. In most of them, at least a few of these areas are done particularly well. Maybe there's one with better than average action and slightly more concrete themes. Maybe there's one that looks stunning visually and has a unique and charming sense of humour. But almost exclusively, the majority of this template underlies the archetypal fresh Marvel film, albeit tweaked slightly for each installment. The first Phase 4 film, Black Widow, is a perfect example of this. It's funny, there's some good choreography, there's a handful of touching character moments, and the key scene of hero-villain encounter is built around a fairly interesting Me Too metaphor. And look at that, 79% fresh. To be clear, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing at all. all modern fiction operates within templates and structures like this to a degree. Just think of the way things like acts and scenes are ingrained within our understanding of screenwriting and drama more broadly. And on a less macro level, Dan Harmon, creator of Community and Rick and Morty, has often spoken about his process, which involves an 8-part story template which underlies the majority of his plots. I may even make a video on that one day, but for now, the point is that structures like these don't preclude originality. There's plenty of room to make each iteration of a template unique.
We don't have to do anything, Morty. This is just a structural guide. We're obviously gonna impart our own style.
I don't like how meta this is getting, Rich.
And I think the same can be said about this Marvel template. The point I am making here, though, is that I think Eternal's mixed critical reception, and therefore its Rotten Tomatoes score, suffered precisely because of the pre-existence of such a template. Eternals is often compared to Zhao's other films, like Nomadland and Found Wanting. Too much action, too much CGI that doesn't feel like a Zhao film, in between parts which almost do. This shows Zhao in the mouth of the Marvel beast, according to Seattle Refined, an able-eyed filmmaker devoured by the Marvel machine. The Observer's Wendy Ide says Chloe Zhao's delicate vision is steamrolled, crushed to oblivion by the steamroller action onslaught of a comic book movie. The review doesn't really explain what it means by this beyond images of a, quote, prevailing tide of genre conventions and fleeting reference made to a synthetic sentiment, whatever that might be. And this idea that all of Zhao's flair is subsumed by the Marvel production line is very common in these reviews, but so is the opposite. Because a lot of these mixed reviews seem to think that this Marvel film fails as a Marvel film. One notes the emotional weight of Thena's story in this film and suggests a, quote, lighter, less dramatic approach may have made this character more appealing. ShouldISeeIt.com, under its Why You Shouldn't See It column, suggests, for many who are used to a particular style, look and feel of Marvel movies, Eternals is going to feel like a dramatic diversion, which may seem out of place and disappointing to MCU diehards. This website's review finishes with the following. Though one can easily enjoy Eternals as a standalone film, with minimal to no knowledge of what the MCU has previously been, the overall production is just not bold enough, big enough, or effective enough to move into the upper echelon of Marvel films. Even positive reviews of this film, like the one from Tilt, which I think makes some really compelling readings of the film, take almost as their primary topic not the film itself, but its resemblance to classic Marvel fare. And BBC Radio 5's Mark Kermode, a critic I usually enjoy and have a lot of respect for, said at one point in his review, "Are we not all tired of this universe by now?" But what universe? Every character we see and 99% of all the plot points in Eternals are entirely new. In trying to judge the Eternals according to the template of the MCU, these reviews are focusing on the exact thing the film isn't. This is the paradox of Eternals' reception then. It's at once too Marvel and not Marvel enough. It's a Zhao film utterly subsumed by the genre tropes of the MCU, and yet it fails as an MCU film. How does this make any sense? It doesn't, unless, here's the trick, we approach Eternals not as Nomadland 2, and not as MCU film number 20 whatever. The rampant and vociferous disagreement noted above tells us that Eternals isn't just a Zhao film or a cookie-cutter Marvel film. It's somewhere in between, off to one side. It's its own thing. So why can't we give it that? It earns that privilege, I think, more than Shang-Chi or Black Panther did, and these are the Marvel films to which most critics offered an olive branch, saw as filmic centres unto themselves, not just franchise fodder. So that's why Eternals' Rotten Tomatoes score doesn't matter, and it isn't even really to do with the limitations of the Rotten Tomatoes platform or scoring system. It's because most of these reviews aren't even really reviewing Eternals, they're just exercises in cinematic taxidermy and an excuse to bag on a franchise to which this film isn't really all that connected. To be clear, I'm absolutely not trying to dismiss all criticism of this movie. Eternals is by no means perfect, and a lot of these reviews do bring up genuine points against the film, and I agree that they should be held against the film. And I firmly believe in the institutions of media criticism. It has a worthwhile place in our culture, and maybe I'll go into detail about that at some point in the future. But I'd like to leave you with an actual review of the Eternals that I think you should go and read if you're deciding whether to go and catch this film, or if you just want to think about some new perspectives on it. Clarice Loughley's review for The Independent is one of the few good ones. It engages in good faith with the film, peppered with considerations of the wider contexts of Zhao's career and style, as well as the world of Marvel, but these never eclipse Eternals itself, and as a result the praise and criticism is valid, and feels grounded in the film I watched, and not on some abstract critical plane inhabited by nothing-y concepts like superhero fatigue or the imagined beast of Marvel and its consuming homogeneity. So yeah, check that out, it's linked in the description. And I think I'm gonna make a few more videos on this film over the next week or so, because more importantly than it being good or bad, I found this film to be thought-provoking. So if you want to see which thoughts it provoked, check this channel in a week or so. Or better yet, subscribe and enable notifications. And if you're not interested in Eternals, some other videos will be going up still as normal, but too bad, because I am. So I'll be making some Eternals stuff too. But yeah, that's all I've got for now, so I hope you enjoyed it. Oh yeah, and do let me know if you'd like to see a point-by-point review of that New Yorker review, because I get the feeling that would be an immensely fun video to make. But yeah, this video's over now, so go. Go! Get out of here, go!